Hi, it's Clark on Temptress. Today I'm going to answer a question I get a lot, and I realize this video won't be for everybody, but we're going to talk about how to install a BankManager. BankManager, for those of you who don't know, is this device I've come up with. We've got 600 installs. Everybody seems to be quite happy with them. What they allow you to do is take lithium iron phosphate batteries and bring them into either your boat, your camper, your off-grid home without making a whole lot of changes. The big thing they do though is this is basically the only game in town for doing the correct charge profile on lithium iron phosphate. If you look up low current overcharge, this does not cause it. I open with, this is Clark on Temptress. Well, I'm not on Temptress right now. I'm in my camper. I have a truck camper. I'm back in the United States for a little while, and I'm going to be installing this BankManager in this camper. Now, this camper actually already has a BankManager. It has one of the early prototypes, as you would expect, and this one's just a whole lot better. And also this will allow me to walk you through the procedure of doing an install in a very clear-cut way. Installing electronics on a yacht isn't easy. The pulling of the wires through all the cabinetry to make it look all yachty at the end is a challenge, and filming it is a bigger challenge. This camper is really easy. All the electrical system is in this cabinet. I'm going to bring a camera into this cupboard so you can see what I've done in here. On this back wall, you will find not only the BankManager and all the wiring and how we install that, but you'll also find I've added an inverter to this camper. I've added solar panels, so this voltage solar regulators in here, the charge controller. If you've got a camper or any other off-grid power system and you want to learn a little bit about how it works, or you'd like to be able to expand it in some way, this video should be useful for you. Let's dive in. Okay, welcome to my closet on my camper. This is where I've done all the wiring. Let's start at the top here. This is the solar charge regulator. It takes lines in from the solar panels, and then it does the charge control tricks required. This is a EP Ever. These are perfectly reasonable little charge controllers that don't cost an arm and a leg, but do all the functionality that's absolutely required. If I was to get one today, I would look seriously at the Victron because I think the prices came down quite a bit. Below this is actually a circuit breaker on the input side. So one of the solar panel wires, the positive one, goes through the circuit breaker. I like that, not because I'm really concerned with the solar panels burning the truck down, but gives me a switch that I can shut them right off when I want to do maintenance, because you can't turn the sun off. Down from here we have the inverter. I'll clip this on the wall now. The inverter takes DC from the batteries and makes AC power, and that lets me run the microwave and various other things in this camper. It gives me all the comforts of home. Honestly, it's tremendous for tools, so I don't have to have battery power tools all the time, but I find it's just really, really useful. Over here is part of my air conditioner. Right now the air conditioner is only offered for boats because it uses water to cool the condenser, but I built one as a prototype. It's working really well, and it's installed in this camper that uses the battery power and the solar to run the air conditioning. It's not exactly as efficient as the one on the boat, but it's real close, and it's like so much more efficient than any other you can buy currently. This little box here in the center, you can disregard this completely. This is the remote controller for the electric legs that a truck camper has, so it can kind of lift itself up and you can drive the truck out, so forget about that. Down here it gets interesting. This is my original prototype Generation 1 BankManager, and it's installed into this camper, and it controls these batteries. I bought two of these a while ago. One of them I did a video on. It's that first in my series of comparing batteries. So many people watch this video. I wish people wouldn't, because of all the batteries I've compared, this is kind of the worst, but for sure, This was the worst job I ever did on a review. My other reviews are a lot better. So if you're thinking about buying a lithium battery, I think it would benefit you to go through any of the review videos and then go to the description, chase down what's called the leaderboard, and you'll find links to everything and my opinions on them. Anyway, these are okay batteries. They're not great. There's better batteries available. This one was just sent to me to do a review on, so I had no other use for it, so I put it in the camper. So this camper has 300 amp hours of lithium iron phosphate batteries. But now to the BankManager itself. So here's the BankManager. The wiring is the same on all of them, except the Gen 3s have 4 more wires to do new tricks. So that's convenient for me because to install a Gen 3 in place of the Gen 1, I can just go wire for wire and connect them up. But let's go through them all and what they do. The furthest wire to the right here is 5 volts, and the 5 volts goes into the current sensor. This is the current sensor. It's that little blue donut that wraps around the wire going to the positive of the batteries. The next 2 wires are usually twisted together so that there's a little interference because it's a very low signal that comes back from this current sensor. They go to the next 2 pins, VREF and VOUT, and they tell the BankManager what the current is that's flowing through this big wire. And then finally there's a ground wire in this mix, and that just goes to the DC ground of the whole system. The next wires are what controls the contactor. That's these 2 right here, and they go to the off and the on poles of the coil of the bistable contactor. If you do a monostable, you'll either use one or the other depending if you're a normally closed or a normally open contactor. The contactor has a common wire on the other side that runs around. Let me find it. Yep. That runs around and goes through a little fuse, and that goes to the lead side of the contactor. The next wire here is how the BankManager senses the voltage in the lithium batteries. That runs through, again, a fuse, and then it runs to the lithium side of the contactor. Good place to pick up the lithium positive voltage. And finally, the lead side, again, through a fuse and to the lead side of the contactor. The one wire I guess I left off in all that is very important. This is the ground wire. And in the old systems, you had to provide a switch. And the switch is how you would turn off all the BankManager systems. The Generation 2 BankManager still requires an external switch. The Generation 3 has a switch built into the BankManager itself. It's just much more convenient that way. So I'm going to switch it over now. I'll take this device out. I'm going to move all these wires one to one onto the new BankManager, and then I'll talk about the new features and get it installed. This version of the BankManager Gen 3 is what we call the surface mount. It has 2 boxes. This one goes where all the wires go, close to the batteries, and it picks up all of the information and sends it out over Ethernet cables, not Ethernet topology. I'm just using the cables to the display unit. The display unit has the microprocessor in it and all the real workings and the real magic, and it uses those Ethernet wires to control what happens in the outside world. So let's go through all that. First, I'm going to turn off the BankManager. For the transfer over, I'm going to do this off camera because it's all tied in here and it's just going to be hard for me to get that set up. But in a second, magically this will be in place of this. We have 4 more screws that the old one didn't have. The Gen 3 has some new tricks up its sleeve. Let's see, the first one I'll talk about is this little device here, comes with it. This is a temperature probe, and I hook the temperature probe up and I shove the probe down here with the batteries. I'll find a good place for it. so it sees the same temperature. And by the way, all these hots get covered. There's a big rubber cap I made that goes over this, and then there's like a subfloor here. So this is all protected from someone dropping metal on it. That would be a bad thing. But back to the install. The black wire goes to your system ground. The red wire goes to the plus 5 volts. And the yellow wire runs to the TMP of the last 4. There's one labeled TMP for temperature. And that'll allow the BankManager to know the pretty precise temperature of what's going on with this probe. And I'll get to why that's important later. The other wire is very interesting. I've already installed over here in the corner a power resistor. And a power resistor, when just hooked up to 12 volts, becomes a heater. It just dissipates energy into heat. Now that, you have to watch out about what to do with that heat, but I've got it bolted pretty tight to this aluminum structure, part of the camper. So the heat will go up here. That becomes a heat sink. And I chose a 6 ohm resistor, so only 2 amps are going to flow through it. Simple Ohm's law. Now one side, the one in the red wire down here, goes through a fuse, which is hard to see, and then it comes up to the lithium side of the contactor. The other one, I'm going to take over here. I think it'll look better if I go under all this. And I'm going to run it to the last terminal on the BankManager. That last terminal is marked load. And let me get that hooked up right now real quick. Okay, so it's hooked up. What will happen is when the BankManager finishes a charge cycle and the lithium batteries are fully charged, the lithium batteries are at a rather high voltage because they've just been charged. It's not great for them to be camping out at that high voltage, and lithium being lithium, even without a load on them, and it won't have a load because this is disconnected, will just float up there. So what will happen is the BankManager will make ground contact with this pin, and that will cause this resistor to come on, make heat out of the batteries. So the batteries will discharge, and they'll keep discharging until the BankManager sees that their voltage has dropped down to a safe level for the batteries. At that point, it shuts this off, and I found pretty consistently in my tests that when it shuts it off, the display that tells you the percent of charge will say that you have remaining 99.97% of your capacity. So it used 0.03% of your capacity to very expeditiously bring your batteries down to a safer voltage. Is that critical? Probably not. Will it make your batteries last longer? Very likely, but it has another side effect that's very handy. Later on, when the lead voltage comes down, when the 2 voltages come together, the BankManager has to connect them. That's the design. If that happens up at a high voltage, which it does very often, because like a cloud went over, down it comes, click, comes on, then the cloud goes away and the system tries to charge. Well, the lithium batteries are connected. BankManager says, no, 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 these are fully charged, has to disconnect. And you can get a situation where you get a bunch of clicking. Well, when you have that feature turned on, you have this installed, the BankManager will bring the batteries down to a lower voltage, which means that the lead has to come down to a lower voltage before they reconnect. Kind of means your charge day is over, but more importantly, when you're down at that lower voltage, you're below the activation energy for that problem. So I can allow a little charge to come in. I don't have to keep turning off the contactor. So life is just generally better if you put that one in. Like I said, that's 6 ohms. On the boat, I use 2 ohms, so I pass a lot more heat. It happens faster than it'll happen here. But I use a heat sink with a fan. I didn't want to deal with a fan in this situation, so that's what I did. There's 2 other pins here. I think I'll take this opportunity to talk about them. One pin is reset, And what that is an opportunity to add a remote reset button. There's a reset button on the display unit, and pushing this one to ground is exactly the same as pushing that button. So it's kind of, if you're putting it into an RV and you're up there about to start the engine and you say, oh, you know, I'm about to run this engine. I want to charge those batteries. I don't care if they're at 84%. I want them to be 100% when we get there. So you just push that button and it says, oh yeah, you're a candidate for recharge. And then you start the engine and it recharges. And the other one is labeled CHG. That one you really should read the manual about. It has two features. One, if it sees that the lithium batteries are being charged at faster than 0.5 C, it will make that pin go high, 5 volts. You could use that signal to tell your alternator to cool its jets. And that can actually be done even if you don't have a regulator that can do that, as long as you have access to the field wire. If you get clever with basically a MOSFET, a resistor, and a relay. I'll do a video on that sometime if you want. And it's kind of handy when you have a big alternator and you have big solar panels and you start the engine on a sunny day. You could be charging these too fast, and the right thing to do is just tell the alternator, cool your jets, there's plenty of power, and you'll save some diesel fuel. The other use for that, if you set it up appropriately on the control head side, the BankManager will give you a few seconds where that goes high before it disconnects the contactor. And if you guys have big 48 volt houses with cheap Chinese inverter chargers and huge solar banks, you probably can imagine why that's important. Generally, on small installations, it just doesn't matter. But it's there for the people who need it. Okay, that changeover is done. Looks a lot alike, doesn't it? But it's a very different animal. Now we need to run the Ethernet cables. So these are the Ethernet cables I'm going to use. Good quality ones, I think. I chose flat ones just because of how I'm going to install and what they're going to look like. I got the highest cat, I don't know what they're up to, 8 now. That's got a little thicker copper, and I figured that's a good thing. In the camper, probably not a big corrosion worry, but on the boat, I always make sure I have gold-plated pins. Corrosion, of course. Now there's 2 cables, and you really want to label them so you don't mix them. Do not cross the primary and the secondary. I hate pulling wire. I just hate it. On boats now, when people ask for my help, I go, sure, I'll help you. And I come over and I make sure they understand it all. I design their circuit, and then I say, okay, pull those wires. Tell me when you're done. So here's the primary. I'm running them in behind this just so that it looks better. And here's the secondary. All set. I'll run these up. I put a hook here years ago. Let's see if I can get to it. Yep. Okay, primary and secondary. I'm putting it in backwards, okay. There we go. Okay, well, we've got it installed now. I'm going to clean up these wires. I managed to break off a little tab on this AC plug and I want to replace it because it was kind of bent anyway. What's important is this is now installed. Let me mount the camera so I don't make you all seasick. And let's take a look at what's going on here. Above this, we've got the solar regulator for the solar panels, and now we've got the BankManager right below it, and we can see everything from here. Firing it up. Heard a little click or two in here in the cupboard. That's the contactor opening up and initializing things, and then it reconnected because it saw that it was safe to do so. But we're going to go right into the menu. So, charge to 100%. I always recommend 100%. BankManager is very good at that. It won't overcharge your batteries. You could choose lower numbers if you want to, if you're going to put your system in storage. And you can actually put it in this use voltage method. It's all in the manual, and that's more, it charges like the way a Victron charges, just a little better. It's not the right way to charge, but if you ever have trouble with your current sensor or you want to balance your battery, your cells in your battery, that's a very useful feature. Oops, back to here. And the thing that everybody has to set is how big is your lithium bank, and we're going to say 300 amp hours because that's ours. The other ones, the reset charge, this says these batteries will not be a candidate for a recharge cycle until they drop below 80% of charge. Max float voltage. Oops. This is technically the voltage that I'm going to talk about chemically is 13.48 volts. I set it for 13.5 by default. Above this line, low current overcharge can happen. The cathode can be damaged. Below this, everything seems to be safe. It's the activation energy of that chemical reaction. Technically, it'd be 1/4 of that per cell. You can adjust that number, but that's a good place to put it. The BankManager, when it thinks your battery is fully charged, when it shows an asterisk on the screen, it will not put any more current in if you're above this voltage. But once you drop below this voltage, it'll let like a little in, a little out, you know, as solar conditions change and loads happen. And what that boils down to is if you set your voltage regulators float below this, I suggest 13.3, it will not click the contactor in and out as much. Contactor type, bistable. I'm using a bistable contactor. There's also monostable. If you set it for monostable and connect it to a bistable contactor, it will destroy the contactor, so never do that. Max amps, this is kind of like a fuse, and you can lower this number down. Like I'll set it for, oh geez, there's no reason in this installation I should ever go over 150 amps of draw. And if I do, something's wrong, like there's a short circuit. So this kind of becomes a software fuse. Never trust software to do fusing. But if you have a fuse, and let's say you have a 200 amp fuse, and you set this for 150 amps, this will likely protect your real fuse that costs money, and this is just software, so you can just reset it once you fix the problem. Minimum percent of charge. I have this off right now. I'm going to set it for, let's say, 20% because I have a nice big bank. If the bank ever drops below 20%, it'll shut the lithium right off, and the camper becomes a lead camper. There is a lead battery still in this camper. There needs to be for the system, and then you use that in the normal way. Sensor type. By default, that's a 200 amp sensor. That's that little blue donut thing. But different ones are available. If you wanted more power or you ended up with a different one somehow, just tell the BankManager. It'll work with all of them. Now we can calibrate the voltage for both lithium and lead. I think it's calibrated quite well right now. Shutdown temperature. Now, if you try to charge a lithium battery below 0 Celsius or 32 Fahrenheit, bad things will happen and the battery could be destroyed immediately. Apparently you can like trickle charge it, but let's not mess there. Now the best thing to do, particularly in a camper that might go to the top of a mountain or be in winter storage, is to have BMSs that protect the batteries from cold weather. The batteries I have don't do that. So we're going to rely on the BankManager a little bit here. Now, it's not the greatest thing because all the BankManager can do is say, it's too cold in here, I'm shutting the lithium right the hell down, and you're a lead camper. But still, better that than destroying the batteries, right? So go into that. It's set for 35 degrees Fahrenheit. When the temperature goes below 35 where the sensor is, batteries are off, and they stay off until I think it goes above 40. I think it's like a 5-degree differential. You can do that in Celsius too. It's 1.7 degrees Celsius. Bluetooth name. If you turn this on and you just choose a number, I'll say this is, well, I'm the only one around, I'm going to say 0. I just activated the Bluetooth radio. When the app is available, should be any time now, you can connect your app on your phone to this and you get a history of all the voltages and when things were turned on and off and just kind of what happened. It should be pretty cool. And there's a parameter here you can go in and you can set the interval between samples. Right now it's 65 seconds, which means the memory will hold 1.5 days. If you crank that way down like you're trying to solve a problem, you only get about 1/10 of a day, but every 5 seconds you get a sample. And if you crank it up, you know, you can go way up and you could have weeks and weeks and weeks. I think you can actually have like almost a month, if I remember right. Yeah, over a month. But I'm going to set it for just a couple days. And I think that 65 is fine. 1.5 days. That means if I get up late, it's about noon, and I say, I wonder how low the voltage of the lithium batteries got before the sun came out. I can look at my phone and the information will be there. Once a minute, I'll know the samples. Current timeout. That's another one of those extra wires. I'm not convinced a lot of people are going to use this feature, but if you have a big installation with multiple BankManagers, it becomes a little extra important. Or if you have like a house with a tremendous solar bank, and if you just turn off the lithium batteries, bad things happen because you might have some cheap Chinese inverter chargers that don't react real fast. Well, what happens here is you can set an amount of time and just set it for 0 and this thing is off. But if you set it for say 5 seconds, what will happen is when the BankManager feels it's time to shut off the lithium battery, it'll actually hold for 5 seconds. But it takes that little pin, the CHG pin, and runs it high. And you could take that signal and you could use that to like shut off your solar bank or do something on that order. And then it will finish its cycle and shut off the batteries. In the camper, I have no need for that, so I'm setting it back to 0. Factory reset, well, that would just undo everything we just changed. But if you say yes, click, it will. I'm going to say no. And then finally, resume operation, which does just that. BankManager just connected. I'm getting a report from the solar panels that I'm charging at 0.2 amps. And I'm getting a report from the BankManager that those 0.2 amps are more or less going right into the lithium batteries, which is great. Well, with the BankManager and the solar regulator remote right here in one place, easy to get to. No more bending and looking in the cupboard for me. I can see what's going in and out of the lithium and the whole state of the lithium, what's going on, control it a bit, but generally it takes care of itself. And I get to look at this and I can tell what is going on with the solar side, what's the voltage up on the roof. What I'm seeing right now is everything's fully charged, so it's kind of shut down, but it will pass a lot of amps. I've seen about 20 amps come in from my roof array on this little truck camper. Well, that's how she stands. If you decide you like one of these, there's a link in the description below that'll tell you how to get one. Like I said, we sold a bunch of them. People seem pretty happy with them. It's the easiest way for sure to put lithium in your camper. Campers are particularly tricky because your battery charger, that goes to the AC line, well, it typically is the same device that has all your circuit breakers in it. So that battery charger, if your camper's at all old, doesn't know a thing about lithium. And honestly, if it's brand new and has a lithium setting, it's not a very good lithium setting. So if you wanted to go with lithium, you've got to replace all the charge sources, and that's one of them. And that means replacing all your circuit breakers. So if you go this way, you just seriously put in what I just put in, take a lithium battery, put it in parallel with the lead you've already got, and just put my BankManager contactor in the positive wire going across between the two, and your install's done. Hope this was helpful. If you sat through it and you don't want a BankManager, sorry, hope it was entertaining. But if you want a BankManager, I needed to do this video to kind of walk through the install to cut down on the number of questions I get. But check your manual, everything's in your manual. 90% of all people just install from the manual and it works out fine for them. So if you have trouble, first reread the manual and then, well, you can come for help. Bye from Clark on Temptress, currently in my camper in Florida.